City. This webinar is part of a programme we run called Growing Manchester, which is funded by the NHS, and the aim of that is to increase access to sustainable and healthy food in Manchester. Okay, thanks for coming along, everybody. I'm delighted to see that we've got around 30 or so people that have joined us today. I'm going to talk for around 30 minutes about 5 types of wild food that you can go and find in your local area right now. I think it's really important that particularly in the current environment where we can't always get down to the shops, or we don't want to maybe quite so much, that we can go and pick up some food on our daily walk and bring it home. I'm finding that some of the things that I run out with first are greens, things that are perishable, and so it'd be great to show you where you can go and find those and stock up. Before we get into some of the different types of wild food that you might be able to find, I'm just going to cover a couple of other things. So why bother with wild food at all? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One of them, I think, is that there's a better taste actually often. A lot of fruit and veg that we buy in the supermarket can be a little bit bland, and fruit and veg that's been sold has been selectively bred for its size and not particularly for its taste. So what you'll find is that if you go out and find your own food foraging, that it's often got a really robust flavour to it, sometimes a little bit too much actually. It can be a little bit smaller though. So of that picture on the right, there's an alpine strawberry. I remember going down to the Alps a few years ago and finding some of those, and the flavour of them is unreal. But they are very, very small, so it takes you a long time to collect them. But I think it's worth it actually. There's an availability thing. So we're going to be covering what to find right now. I think it's really important that you can go out and find food in the wild at the moment. And but there are other months of the year. This month's actually particularly good for wild food, but you can find things all year round. There's plenty of books, and I'll talk about those a little bit later, that will show you things that you can go and forage at any time of year. I think it's it's not always been a frivolous pastime. This in World War II, for example, the government had a campaign called the Hedgerow Harvest, where people went out and were asked to go and find food out in the wild, and then further back in times of famine, people will have had to go out and find food in this way. So ultimately it's a survival kind of thing as well, but I think it can be a lot of fun. It's almost like hunting actually, and it can be it can be a really sort of good experience that you can have with nature actually as well. So it's something where you can learn a lot about plants as well, and also the social history of the UK. For example, nettles are found where there's old human settlements, because nettles were used a lot by our ancestors for various reasons, and I'll cover those in a minute. And it's great for the environment, of course. The 0 food miles and ecological footprint to food that's grown or growing naturally, haven't had to use pesticides or fertilizers, and it hasn't had to come from somewhere around the other side of the world to get onto your plate. So there's something really good about that as well. There are things to watch out for, and somebody has already mentioned those in the chat thing. So yeah, obviously don't be picking plants from right next to roads because of pollution, and also verges, along heavily used paths because of dogs and cats as well. So you want to try and find parts of, if you're going to a park or to a nature reserve, try and find bits where other people haven't really gone actually. You want to be harvesting just sections of the plant and not the whole thing. So we want to try and minimize any impact that we've got on nature from going and collecting it to eat. So don't take, the whole section, maybe take some of the leaves of the plant and eat those so that it can grow back. A lot of these plants that you're collecting are very, very common actually. So it's not particularly an issue in terms of, in biodiversity. Always make sure that you're collecting the right plants, because some plants are poisonous and other plants as well will interfere with medication. So you need to be careful with that. And then mushroom picking, we're just going to cover one mushroom that's available at this time of year, right at the end of this presentation. Requires particular expertise because picking the wrong mushrooms for consumption can be dangerous. So we'll cover that a little bit in a minute. Okay, so first one, which you should easily be able to go out and find, and is actually one of my favorites now, is ground elder. I had it at my allotment. I've had it for about 8 years, and it was an enemy of mine. If anybody does grow their own and has got an allotment, has had ground elder, then they will know that it is almost impossible to get rid of. It's a perennial weed, so it comes back every year. But I had this revelation about 3 or 4 years ago that maybe it was a useful plant as well. I Googled it, and it turned out that it was actually a gift from the Romans to us in the UK, because they brought it over so that they could eat it. And it's spread all over the UK. It's edible from around March onwards until about sort of like maybe even February to April. It's got a really interesting taste. It's a little bit like, it's got quite lemony, carrot, sort of parsley. You find it in shady spaces. Once you've got the hang of what it looks like, you will see it all over the place. It's really, really good for you. It's got iron, magnesium, and vitamin C in it. It's also known as gout weed or bishop's weed. I think it was used to treat gout at one point as well. So it's a really useful plant, and I'm using it a lot like spinach, really, as something that can top up the veg that I've got, the fresh veg that I've got at home. When you pick it, you want to be picking the younger leaves, as is often the case actually with a lot of these greens that you're picking from the wild. So on the left there, we've got a young shoot of ground elder, which is what you want to pick. And on the right is a much older leaf. That's probably about the size of a hand, that one on the right, actually. I should have put something there to show the differences in the sizes. So the shoot on the left is probably about as long as a finger, a sort of adult finger. So you want to be getting those little shoots and collecting those. I collect ground elder with my hands. I did used to use scissors actually, but it's really easy to just put your hands and just pick off the shoots. In some ways, hands are the best way to collect it. So I've been making, this is a curry that I made. So it's a dal, and I've fried up onions and spices and ground elder. I think I put some red pepper in this dal on the right hand side, and obviously added lentils, and it gave it this really good, as I say, it's got a bit of celery, a bit of zinginess to it, so it gave it a really good flavour. It does boil right down to almost nothing, so you can use quite a lot of it. And I have, like many people, been making bread. I wasn't baking until a month ago. I think I probably made about 10 loaves now. And what I did with these balms that I made is I made the dough first. I chopped up the ground elder, and then I mixed the ground elder in with the bread dough, and then baked it in the oven, and that turned out really well as well. So just get creative with it. There's loads of different things you can do with it. Second one had to be included. It's a sort of classic wild food to gather. Again, it's available right now. You have to pick it with, I use marigold gloves, scissors, a plastic bag, and I almost always get stung anyway, at least once. So everybody knows this plant. They've got a bit of a bad reputation, but it's freely available. It's full of vitamins, actually, and it's got a really unique taste, like nothing else really. And you can make soup out of it. There's a Hugh Fernley Whittingstall recipe. If you just Google that, maybe Emily will pass that on at the end of the presentation as well. And yeah, it's also got lots of other uses as well. I touched on at the start that human settlements would have one way to find out where old human settlements are that archaeologists use is they look out for nettles, actually, because nettles were also used for clothes, presumably not for underwear. They also make good tea. If anybody's had those herbal teas, then you'll find nettles, and it's easy to just use the nettles now, dry them off, cut them down, dry them off, and then you can store that for easily a year and use that to make tea. It can also be used to make paper as well. So it's a really versatile plant, actually, that was used by our ancestors. So this is me making some nettle soup. There's the nettles on the left. You want to be collecting them before they flower, and right now is perfect, just as they're coming up. So the fresher the better, actually, and the younger the better when you're collecting nettles. I try to get as many nettles as I possibly can into the pan. I think it's got great flavour. Sometimes some of the recipes that I've found online are a little bit watery, and I think that's because you haven't got enough nettles into the pan and into the recipe. So they wilt right down to almost nothing, which is the photo on the right, on the left hand side there. I then blend them up with a stick blender, and then it looks like it does on the right hand side. And again, some recipes don't do this, but I also sieve the this blended up nettle mixture, and that means that I take all of these sort of fibrous parts of the plant out of the dish, and you end up with this really nice sort of nettle stock that can be used for soups and adding other vegetables. So Hugh Fernley Whittingstall's adding leeks, and I think there's carrots and things like that going in as well. But it's like a really strong sort of vegetable stock, really, that you make. You can just drink it like that as well, though. But it's the sort of soup that you'd drink in a mug rather than a sort of thick soup. There's some of the soup. So third one is hops. Again, it's available now. It's the hop shoots, which are actually the flowers there, those round things on the right hand side, are used to flavour beer. But the shoots themselves, just as they start to grow at this time of year, are also edible. They're available in the wild in hedgerows. I've not seen any around Manchester, actually, but I have seen them a little bit further out into the countryside. Maybe somebody that's listening has seen hops growing wild. I've got some in my back garden, so I've just been eating those, really. You want to be picking them when they're about 6 inches, 15 centimeters long. So it's just a bit like an asparagus spear, really. And you cook them in the same way. You fry them up with butter, and you can put a little bit of salt on them as well. I suppose you could fry them with olive oil if you don't have butter. And they're really tasty. So you can give those a go. On the left-hand side, that's the shoots just coming up, and they're the shoots that I ate the other day on the right-hand side. Okay, next one is wild garlic. Again, somebody's mentioned wild garlic. In Manchester, I'm picking it from, there's some in Alexandra Park. although it's a little bit busier there, so you have to find somewhere off the paths. There is lots down in Chiltern Water Park. If anybody knows Fletcher Moss, there's some there. So yeah, it's in, tends to not be in parks so much, but if you know somewhere that's a little bit wilder, then you'll probably find it there. And it's either in a woodland or it's in a sort of wood edge kind of area. So if you can know anywhere like that, maybe fairly mature woodland as well, some older trees, then go and have a look. I wouldn't be surprised if you'll find it there. You tend to find it by smell, actually. So you smell it first because it's got a really strong smell of garlic, and it's a sort of wild version of garlic, really. But you eat the leaves rather than the bulb. It's edible all the way through until June. There's loads. It's a really versatile thing to eat. There's loads of different recipes. You can make oils, by mixing it up with oil and flavoring oils. You can make salads. I've been making pesto, salsa verde. You can use it for noodle soup or for stir fries. So yeah, it's actually a gourmet vegetable. So if you go to a gastro pub or a really a restaurant that sells really fine cuisine, then particularly at this time of year they'll have wild garlic, also known as ramsons, on the menu. But it's just that easy to go out and find it yourself as well. So top left, I've washed. Obviously, when you're getting this wild food, give it a wash as if you were getting food from the supermarket. I've given it a good wash and I've just started to chop it up there. And then the bottom photo is a stir fry. I think it goes really well with a stir fry, actually. So yeah, chuck it into that, and it goes well with eggs as well. Or again, just get creative with it. It's good stuff. This is a sort of pesto recipe that you can use wild garlic for. And then the final one is this St. George's mushroom, which is a mushroom which can be found at this time of year. Of course, there are lots of poisonous types of mushroom out there. It's very unlikely that you will mistake a poisonous mushroom for this mushroom at this time of year, because most of them grow in the summer and the autumn. And in fact, most mushrooms grow in the summer and the autumn. So there's not actually so many growing out there right now, but you do need to be really careful about identification. They tend to be about, that should say 5 to 15 centimeter caps, and the caps is that kind of top bit of the mushroom. The flesh is white, and they've got very crowded white gills, and they've got a sort of nice smell to them. They're very, very tasty. I've found some, again, near me in Chiltern Water Park. I've also found some in a friend's garden in Whalley Range as well. So they do grow in Manchester, and they're called a St. George's mushroom because they tend to come out around St. George's Day, which is the 23rd of April. So if you get out there in the next couple of weeks, just keep your eyes peeled. But obviously be really, really careful when you're picking mushrooms. So unless you're 100% sure, then don't eat them. I think everybody knows that from being told that a lot of times before. So yeah, they're great with garlic, and probably really good with wild garlic, although I've not tried. And obviously fried up, they're delicious. In terms of things to read, well, there's a very good book by Roger Phillips called Mushrooms. So if you do want to get into picking mushrooms, then I really recommend this. There's lots of good photos in there from all sorts of different angles and sizes, because they can vary a little bit in how they look sometimes, different species of mushrooms. And he's like catalogued all the ones that you might find in the UK and put photos on in the book about them. So I'd recommend that. There's also Food for Free by Richard Maybe, and various other similar books. Some of them can be pretty inexpensive. You can get little small. I've got a little Collins book, which was £5, which has got all of the wild food that we've just mentioned, including the quite a few different types of mushroom as well in it. So that's worth a look. And if you want to go, I should have said at the start, really, I think it's really important that we talk about wild food right now. But I would say I'm not a professional forager. You know, I'm a sort of keen amateur, I suppose. But there are some really knowledgeable people in the Manchester area. There's Dave Winnard, who we often team up with to run courses around Manchester. And there's another guy called Jesper Launder, I think, who is based out in West Yorkshire as well. So look up them. Dave Winnard has got a website called Discover the Wild. Obviously, he won't be running sessions at the moment, but he'd be a good person to look up if you want to get into this a little bit more. There were a few other plants that I could have mentioned as part of this that you might want to look up as well. I won't go into in any detail. Himalayan balsam, just as it starts to grow, is edible. So if you live near a river, you may well be able to find that. Chickweed, and all of these are available at this time of year again. Chickweed can be used in salads when it's very young. Dandelion leaves, I don't like them so much. I think they're a little bit bitter, but some people use those, and you can obviously mix it in with recipes, and so that you're not kind of eating it on its own, and that can sort of dilute the taste a little bit. Might be a little bit late for hawthorn leaves, but hawthorn leaves is something that people used to eat anyway. And also Japanese knotweed is actually edible at this time of year, just as it starts to come up. It's used a little bit more like rhubarb though, so it's something that you would make add sugar to and make a dessert out of. And if you are collecting Japanese knotweed, then you need to be 100% sure that it hasn't had any herbicides on it, because obviously it's a invasive species, and it is treated sometimes so that it can be killed. So you need to be really careful not to to eat contaminated knotweed. So that's it for the presentation bit of this anyway. Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, then I will have a go at answering those now. As I say, I'm not it's not my particular area of interest, but yeah, I will give it a go.
Okay, great. So I'll just go through the chat and see, go through some of the questions that people have asked. Lots of great information shared about recipes and places to find different things and different parts of plants that can be used. It asks, does bishopweed have a certain smell, i.e. can you identify it by smelling that it's carroty?
Bishop's weed is ground elder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You can pick it off. You can kind of, like a lot of wild food, I suppose, smell is a big part of identification. So yeah, you can pick it, you can rub it in your fingers, have a smell. I kind of get like parsley and carrot and celery, and it's from the, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's from the carrot family of plants as well. So yeah, you can definitely identify it from the smell. If I couldn't see it, I think I'd be able to identify it now from the smell. But I suppose you have to, particularly if you're a beginner, you're going out there now, you'd have to, try and, you'd have to, take a photo, check out the smell as well. Maybe have a little taste as well, and and identify it that way.
Great. Yeah, I just checked it is part of the carrot family.
Right. Okay.
And is that something, John, that you can pick even when the flowers have come out and things? Can you use the flowers as well?
No, it's just right now is the time to pick it. Yeah, so I wouldn't go beyond April, and actually when it flowers, like nettles as well, I think it starts to become a diuretic, which is bad. It just means that you're going to go to the loo more often, doesn't it? But that's not particularly comfortable. So yeah, it's best to just eat it when it's young before it flowers. And the same goes for nettles, actually.
And that's the same for Bistort as well, for the dock leaf pudding. Before the flowers come up, it's really stinky flowers. Before they come up, you can eat it. But
Yeah.
yeah. So Karina asks, are there any lookalikes to the St. George's mushroom that we should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, there are some that look similar, but they're not at the same time of year, and so you wouldn't find them right now. There's some that are, deadly, but they're going to be way into summer and autumn, and you just wouldn't find them now. So, there's a mushroom called the death cap that looks a little bit like it. Is also white. But yeah, obviously mushrooms is it's something that you're going to need to be 100% sure about. I would recommend getting, at the very least, a really good book. What mycologists do when they're identifying mushrooms is they're looking and triangulating a whole load of different things to make sure that 100% sure that they're getting the right mushroom. They're looking at the smell, the look of it. Also, where it grows can be a really good indicator of species. A lot of species are symbiotic with certain trees, so they will only be found under an oak tree, for example, or they'll only be found in this very particular habitat. So, and then another thing that people do is that they do a spore print. So all mushrooms have got spores, but the spores can be different shapes and different colors as well. So if you, obviously we're a little bit nervous about talking about picking mushrooms, but this St. George's mushroom is because of the time of year, it is a safer mushroom to pick. But you'd still need to make sure that you've got all of that you think that every single thing about it is 100% sure.
And then once you know where certain mushrooms grow, you can keep going back, can't you?
Yeah.
It'll come up year after year after year. And I suppose there's always the foraging walks. It's often fungi forays and things on in the autumn months that you can go along to. Lots of foraging experts do them, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Hannah asks, how far away from a road would you recommend it's safe to pick things?
Yeah, we have the same question because we do a lot at Sow the City with community gardens and allotments and people growing veg, and yeah, it depends how busy the road is, but one of the concerns with pollution is, I think, probably is particulates from cars, and I don't think they would be traveling so far. They're quite big particles, so I think if you get sort of around 50 meters or so from a busy road, then that's probably okay. There's other gases that come from cars, but I don't think they're going to be sort of getting stuck onto these plants. Obviously you should be giving them a really good wash as well before you eat them.
Right, yeah. And there's something about sort of beside pathways and things, aren't there? Away from dog walkers and things like that.
Yeah, I think even in a city, you should be able to find you know, all of these all of these plants that I've mentioned are, you know, they'll be tucked away in various parks and sort of wild areas, so you shouldn't really need to go, you know, nearish a road
Mhm.
to find them.
So, well, Karina's asking if we could do this again with 5 more foraged edibles. I suppose it might be something that we come back to again later in the year, because we can come on to things like fruit, other mushrooms maybe in more kind of late summer, autumn.
Yeah, I think we're sort of just finding our way really with these
Mm,
webinars, and we did one on growing your own veg last week, and that was really popular as well. So I think we'll keep going at it, and like Emily says, there's you know, there could be a completely new set of plants in June, you know, and then a completely new set of plants again in August. No problem.
yeah. Lainey asks, is there anywhere in the UK that you can take mushrooms to be identified?
Hi mum, I should say, really. Thanks for asking that, the most difficult question so far. I don't know. I mean, I guess at the universities there probably would be mycologists. I know that because I have friends who are ecologists actually, and they sort of work for, you know, to, you know, as part of kind of big infrastructure projects actually, to check that there's no newts and you know, various other species in a development area, and kind of make, you know, mitigate impacts, ecological impacts. And I know there's mycologists that work, because actually there's some really rare types of mushroom as well. So there's some obviously there's some experts out there, so you might be able to get the contact details of them and maybe email them if you weren't totally sure. There's not an app yet. I mean, we've been using at So the City an app called Plant Finder, which is actually artificial intelligence app for identifying plants. And that would probably work quite well, actually, thinking about it, Emily, for foraging, wouldn't it? I mean, you wouldn't want to sort of guarantee that it was right, but and you have to pay for this one as well, unfortunately. But it is available, and I think there's a couple of other options as well. And literally, you just take a photo of a plant, and it tells you what species it is. I don't think there's one for mushrooms. Maybe that's because mushrooms are, you know, it's a bit of a hot potato, really, mushrooms, isn't it, sometimes? So
I
maybe
just had a
people don't.
quick Google, and there's a fungus ID public group on Facebook.
Okay, nice.
Maybe that's something to do. Join that, have a look at the kind of things that people are putting up. Imagine you need lots and lots of pictures of all the different parts of the mushroom, but that might be something to join.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, Claudia is talking about Himalayan balsam and how common it is. I've heard that you can use the seeds, and they're really good. Kind of well, they're obviously from the Himalayas, so I think they use them in different curry kind of dishes in that sort of area.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what they. Yeah, and I mean, it was introduced again. It's an invasive species, and it's a real problem here. But the seeds are edible, but also the shoots are edible as well. The seeds will be in kind of August type time, and they're not that dissimilar from pine nuts actually. And so yeah, they're delicious. Takes a little while to collect them, but yeah, they're really good at eating.
I was looking up nettle seeds as well. Someone mentioned using them as like a peppercorns, I suppose, instead of pepper, and they're supposed to be really good for if you have any kind of thyroid conditions, strengthening adrenals, and they're full of vitamin C and essential fatty acids. So that's just the seeds themselves from the nettles.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
look that up. That's interesting.
Hmm. A lot of people discussing sort of how to preserve different things. I suppose if, you know, certain plants are only available or edible at certain times of year, kind of saying They could be frozen, pureed and frozen, or dehydrated, dried and stored. Have you done any of that kind of stuff before, John?
I mentioned the nettles, so I've dried the nettles so that I can have tea all year round. That worked fine. I think I did that in. I think I just dried that in the air. I don't think I put it in the oven or anything. I just dried it in the, just air dried it. Wait until they dried out. They went crispy. I put them into a jar and they survived for a year. And I had nettle tea. Things like these oils will preserve this stuff. So if you made a sort of garlicky oil or a pesto, oil is a preservative. I haven't frozen any of this stuff actually, but obviously you could make soups and things, and then you could put them in the freezer, and they'd survive for 3 months or whatever. So I haven't so much actually, but we do maybe later in the year, if we do another one of these, then and we're talking about fruit, then we do quite a lot around preserves and fruit, don't we, Emily, sometimes? So
yeah,
that we've done a bit more of that, I suppose.
Yeah. When there's a real kind of glut of black currants or whatever you can find in the in late summer, then it's a great thing to do. It's to make jams and preserve things.
Yeah.
Any more questions from anyone? I think that's about it in the chat box here.
Great.
I'll just see if anyone else comes up with anything. I've got this Collins Gem Food for Free book in front of me here, and it's very good. I'd recommend to anyone, and it has a calendar at the beginning of what you can pick in every month. And I mean, a lot of the stuff in here though is kind of seaside vegetables. Seems like you'd be completely sorted if you were living by the sea.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So our presentation next week is it the green wellbeing one, I think?
Yeah, it'll be covering some of the research there is around the benefits of nature on mental health, physical health, well-being, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the projects that we've been working on at Sow the City as well. We thought it was quite relevant at the moment because people are really reliant on that sort of little bit of bit of nature or outdoor time that they get, and are really appreciating that.
If you want to check out our social media, Twitter and Facebook, we're just kind of Sow the City UK, and we're putting up a lot of different how-tos on there and little videos that we're doing as well, and links to the webinars. So it would be great if you could join that. And I think that's about it for this week, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for coming, everyone.